Easter brunch at my parents' house was always a parade of fake smiles and polite tension. The kind where your fork scrapes the plate a little too loudly and everyone acts like they didn't hear it. I'm Nathan, 34, and I've been the so-called successful one in the family ever since I started my own logistics company 8 years ago. I built it from scratch with nothing but a used laptop, an idea, and a ton of sleepless nights. Now, I live in a decent house on the outskirts of town, drive a reliable car I paid for in cash, and, until recently, set aside part of every month's earnings for vacations I never had time to take. My younger brother, Joel, took a different path. Or rather, he didn't take much of a path at all. He's 31, still lives at home, and has cycled through more passion projects than I can count. App developer, life coach, crypto guru. Now he's apparently into NFTs, though I'm pretty sure he couldn't explain what one is if you paid him. And my parents? They treat him like he's some misunderstood genius, just one lucky break away from making it big. The brunch table was laid out like something from a Hallmark movie. Quiche, glazed ham, those little deviled eggs my mom always overboils. We sat in the dining room with the big bay window open, letting in the breeze, and for a moment, I actually let myself think this year might be different. Maybe we'd just eat, catch up, and part ways without the usual landmine of passive-aggressive digs and guilt-tripping. Joel had been unusually quiet so far, poking at his food and checking his phone every few minutes. Mom fluttered around, pouring mimosas like she was hosting the Oscars, and Dad, stoic, silver-haired, the type who wears a button-down even at home, sat at the head of the table, napkin folded precisely on his lap. We were mid-conversation about some random article my mom read about air fryers when Dad cleared his throat in that slow, deliberate way he does when he's about to deliver something important. Everyone paused. Even Joel looked up from his phone. "Nathan," Dad said, setting his fork down with an audible clink. "Family means sacrifice." I already knew where this was going. That phrase was a warning shot. A smooth, calculated entry into a conversation that had clearly been decided without me. I gave him a tight smile, the kind you wear like armor, and waited. "You'll be covering your brother's debts," he continued, pointing his fork at me as if that made it more official. No questions asked. The air in the room changed. It wasn't just a request, it was a decree. One passed down from a throne I never asked to kneel before. Joel didn't flinch. Mom just smiled, folding her hands in front of her like a satisfied schoolteacher watching a lesson unfold exactly as planned. I set my glass down slowly. "What debts?" Dad's jaw tensed, but it was Joel who answered, his voice casually annoyed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just some startup stuff. A few loans, some back rent. It's not a big deal." "How much?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. 42 grand, Dad said, as if he were announcing the weather. My breath caught. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process the number. Joel shrugged and took a sip of orange juice. "It's really not that much. You make that in what, a few months?" I looked at my mother. She gave me a look that was both pleading and smug, like this was my chance to be the good son. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice low but steady. Dad nodded once. "Family looks out for each other. And this was your plan all along." I scanned their faces. To spring this on me at brunch. No one said anything. That silence was louder than any response. I could feel the anger rising in me, but it wasn't the hot, explosive kind. It was cold, slow, and sharp, like ice cracking underfoot. This wasn't just about the money. It was about everything they'd assumed. That my success meant I owed them. That because I'd worked hard and made something of myself, I was now a piggy bank for Joel's disasters. That my choices, my sacrifices, meant nothing compared to the golden boy fantasy they'd built around my brother. I stood up calmly, not slamming my chair back, not raising my voice. Just stood. I pulled my keys from my pocket and set them on the table. The soft clink echoed louder than I expected. "Then I guess this house, this car, and that vacation fund," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "All going with me." Mom's smile faded. Joel froze. Dad narrowed his eyes. I leaned forward slightly. "Family means choices," I said, "and I'm finally making mine." And with that, I walked out of the dining room, out of the house, and didn't look back. But what I didn't tell them, what they still don't know, is that this wasn't the first time they'd pulled something like this. And I wasn't about to let it happen again. You see, Easter was just the beginning. Let me back up a bit. Because if I'm going to tell this right, you need to understand the full scope of how long this has been building. The debt? That was just the latest brick in a wall they've been stacking behind my back for years. It started when I was a teenager. Joel always had this shine to him. Not in a charming way, more like a spotlight constantly following him around, courtesy of our parents. If he got a B on a test, it was framed on the fridge. If I brought home straight A's, it was expected. When I got my first job at 16, stocking shelves at a grocery store, Dad said it would teach me responsibility. When Joel got fired from 2 summer jobs in a row, they blamed the managers for not understanding his potential. I remember once when I was 19, home for the summer from college, I caught Joel sneaking into the garage late at night. Turns out he'd borrowed my car, without asking, and sideswiped a mailbox. I found out because I saw the dent and confronted him. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Don't be such a narc." And when I told my parents, they grounded me for escalating things. That was the moment I realized something wasn't right, that they had this deep, inexplicable loyalty to him that didn't extend to me. But I was young, and I told myself it would pass. That maybe, once I graduated, got a job, built a life, things would even out. They didn't. When I got my first apartment, I paid for it with a signing bonus from my internship. When Joel moved out for the first time at 25, my parents co-signed a lease and paid his first 6 months of rent. When he failed to make payments after that, they called me. "Nathan," Mom said sweetly on the phone, "your brother's just going through a rough patch." "He's 27, I replied. "That patch is starting to look permanent." She didn't laugh. She just sighed. "You've always been so responsible. You know we're proud of you." Proud. That word always felt hollow. Like it was a consolation prize for being the one who kept the wheels turning while Joel steered the family car off every cliff in sight. And every time they bailed him out, I felt it chipping away at me. Not the money, though sometimes they asked for that too, but the assumption. The unspoken rule that I'd always show up. Always fix it. Always pick up the pieces. So when they dropped the 42 grand bombshell on Easter Sunday, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a confirmation of everything I'd quietly suspected but never wanted to admit. They didn't see me as a son. They saw me as a solution. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on my balcony, listening to the wind and thinking through everything. The years of quiet obedience. The swallowed frustration. The vacations I'd postponed. The relationships I'd let fade because I was too busy trying to be the dependable one. The good son. The backup plan. But I wasn't going to be their plan anymore. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone yet, was that I'd been working on something. Something big. And suddenly, I knew exactly how I was going to use it. But that part, that comes later. For now, let's just say this. My parents think I walked out of that brunch empty-handed. They have no idea what I took with me. I didn't hear from my parents for 2 weeks after Easter. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive email from Mom pretending to check in while squeezing in a reminder that Joel was struggling. The silence was deafening and, honestly, kind of welcome. I spent those days focusing on work, on myself, and on finally taking some time to breathe. For once, I wasn't rearranging my schedule to help Joel move out of another failed lease or sitting on tense family Zoom calls trying to mediate some new drama they'd dragged me into. But peace doesn't last long when you're the designated fixer in a dysfunctional family. On the 15th day after brunch, the silence cracked. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly numbers for my company when I got the call. It was Mom. I hesitated before answering. I even let it ring a few times longer than usual, part of me debating whether to just ignore it. But curiosity won out. "Hi, Mom," I said flatly. There was a pause, then that familiar, syrupy voice. "Nathan, sweetie, I've been worried sick. Why haven't you called?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't going to play this game. She sighed, as if she were the victim. "Anyway, we need to talk. Can you come by the house tonight?" "Why?" "It's about Joel. He's in trouble." "Of course he is. I thought I made myself clear at Easter," I said. "I'm not your ATM." "This isn't about money," she replied quickly, but I could already hear the tension in her voice. "Please, Nathan, just come." I don't know why I agreed. Maybe it was habit. Maybe a small, stupid part of me still wanted to believe my parents could change. That they might finally see Joel for who he really was and stop treating me like the safety net they never had to build for him themselves. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the porch light was already on. I noticed Joel's beat-up sedan parked in the street. A surprise, since he usually parked in the driveway like he owned the place. I stepped inside without knocking. The air smelled like cinnamon candles and reheated coffee, nostalgic, but suffocating. They were all waiting for me in the living room. Dad in his usual chair, stiff and unsmiling. Mom perched on the edge of the couch, twisting a napkin in her hands, and Joel slouched in the armchair, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like a sulking teenager. "Nathan," Dad said by way of greeting, his tone clipped. "Sit down." "I'm good standing," I replied. Mom jumped in. "We've had a very serious situation come up." She looked at Joel and gave him a little nod. He rolled his eyes, but sat forward. "I got into some legal stuff," he said, like he was announcing he'd gotten a parking ticket. "Legal stuff?" He didn't answer. Mom did. Joel took out a loan from some private lenders. He was trying to get his NFT project off the ground. It didn't work out, and now they're asking for repayment. With interest. I stared at them. "And this is what to do with me." "They're threatening him," Mom whispered. "They came to the house. They know where we live." My blood ran cold. Not out of fear, but fury. "And you let them in?" I asked. "They didn't break in or anything." Joel barked. "They just showed up. It's not a big deal." I turned to my parents. "So now he's dragged criminal lenders to your door, and you want me to what? Handle it? Clean it up?" "Again, we thought maybe you could talk to someone," Dad said. "You know people. Business people. Maybe someone could negotiate." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want me to play fixer for the guy who keeps setting fire to everything he touches?" Dad's face tightened. "You always do this, Nathan. You act like you're better than everyone." "No," I snapped. "I just act like someone who takes responsibility for his life." Joel stood up, fists clenched. "I knew you'd be a jerk about it." "Oh, I'm the jerk? You bring loan sharks to our parents' front door, and I'm the problem?" Mom tried to cut in, but I raised my hand. "No, I'm done. Whatever hole he's in, he can climb out of it himself. I'm not throwing away everything I've worked for just so he can fail upward again." I turned to leave, but Dad stood up and raised his voice, something he rarely did. "If you walk out of this house tonight, Nathan, you're cutting ties. You don't come back from this." I paused at the door, jaw tight. Then maybe it's time I stopped coming back. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out and didn't look back. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, not just with anger, but with clarity. For years, I'd been trying to convince myself that someday they'd see me, not as a wallet, not as a scapegoat, but as a person. But all they saw was what I could give. And then it got worse. 3 days later, I got a call from my bank. A polite but concerned voice on the other end asked me to confirm a wire transfer I hadn't authorized. $14,000 pulled from one of my business accounts. I froze. "I didn't make any transfer," I said. "We flagged it because the request came from a suspicious IP address. It matched another request from last week that did go through. $6,500. That one wasn't flagged in time." My stomach dropped. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and logged into my accounts. Another $4,000 had vanished from my personal savings. The recipient? An LLC registered under a name I didn't recognize, until I searched it and found that it was one of Joel's old startups. I was stunned. He hadn't just asked for money. He'd stolen it. And he had to have gotten the information from somewhere. I tore through my memory, trying to figure out how. And then it hit me. A few months back, during a family get-together, Joel had asked to use my laptop. Said he needed to send an email. I'd handed it over without thinking twice. I never imagined he'd use that moment to plant spyware or dig through my saved passwords. But that was before I knew just how deep his entitlement went. My hands were shaking as I printed the bank records. I wanted to scream, to drive straight to my parents' house and throw the papers on the table, demand to know how they could defend him now. But I didn't. I sat with it. I let it settle. I let the betrayal sink into my bones until it hardened. This wasn't just some petty theft. This was a message. A declaration. Joel didn't see me as a brother. He saw me as a resource. And he was willing to steal from me and risk my company's financial security to get what he wanted. And my parents? If I brought this to them, I already knew how it would go. Mom would look horrified but find a way to blame stress. Dad would say I shouldn't have left my laptop unattended. Joel would deny it or play the victim. Say he was desperate, that I owed him. I didn't want their apologies. I wanted something better. I wanted them to feel what I felt. So I started planning. That project I'd mentioned before, the thing I'd been quietly working on in the background, It suddenly took on a new purpose. What began as a long-term exit strategy became the first step in a very different kind of exit. I wasn't just going to cut ties. I was going to make sure that when I left, I took everything they assumed I'd always be there to provide. But before I could move, I needed to gather proof. I needed to be smart, precise, ruthless, because if they wanted war, they were about to get it. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest I've had in years. After the theft, I locked down everything, changed all my passwords, pulled funds into secure accounts, hired a forensic IT specialist to sweep my devices for malware. The guy found traces of a keylogger buried in an old Chrome extension. It had been feeding my login credentials to someone for weeks, maybe months. The install date. That same weekend Joel had borrowed my laptop. I reported it. Not to the police. Not yet. First, I wanted the facts. I needed airtight proof. So I paid for a full trace, backtracked IP addresses, subpoenaed transaction logs, everything. And piece by piece, it all pointed in the same direction. Joel. His fingerprints were all over it. He didn't even try to hide it. His name was listed as the primary manager on the fake LLC account the funds were transferred to. But what hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was how easy it had been. How little thought he must have given it. Like stealing from me wasn't a big deal. Just another casual inconvenience he expected me to swallow. And worst of all, he wasn't done. That same week, I got an email from one of my vendors. They'd received a message from my assistant requesting they reroute a shipment to a new location. I never made the request. When I asked for a copy of the message, guess who the email was signed by? Nate J., executive assistant. Joel's middle name is James. I confronted my parents. I drove back to the house, this time with a folder full of printed statements, screenshots, and a hard drive containing every bit of digital evidence I could gather. I didn't plan on arguing. I planned on showing them, once and for all, what he was capable of. Mom answered the door. She looked surprised to see me. "I need to talk to both of you," I said. She hesitated, then called for Dad. They led me to the kitchen table, the same one we'd sat around every holiday like we were a picture-perfect family. I placed the folder on the table and pushed it toward them. "What's this?" Dad asked. "Proof. Joel's been stealing from me. Not just money, client data, vendor contacts, personal information. He planted spyware on my laptop. He's impersonated me to redirect shipments. I have timestamps, IP traces, bank logs, everything." Mom blinked rapidly. Dad opened the folder, rifled through the pages. The silence that followed stretched into something brittle. Then Mom finally spoke. "You don't know that it was Joel." I stared at her. "You think someone else used my laptop, logged in from his IP, transferred funds to a business he registered, using my credentials that were stolen the same weekend he used my computer?" "He wouldn't," she started, but her voice was weak. "He did." Dad remained quiet. He looked at one page for a long time, one with Joel's name signed electronically on a fund request, and then slid the folder back to me without a word. "So what do you want us to do?" Mom asked, her voice cold now. Defensive. "I want you to stop protecting him," I said. "I want you to understand that this wasn't some mistake. He targeted me. He stole from me. And if he's willing to do that to his own brother, what makes you think he won't do worse?" Neither of them answered. And that was all I needed to know. I left without another word. That night, sitting in my dark apartment, I felt something snap. Not in a dramatic, meltdown kind of way, but like a rope finally fraying at the last thread and giving out. I'd always thought I could keep the peace. That if I worked hard enough, showed up enough, sacrificed enough, they'd respect me, see me, value me. But they didn't want me. They wanted a version of me that existed only to serve Joel's narrative. The convenient brother, the reliable backup, the cash flow they didn't have to earn. I was done chasing their approval. And for a while, I just fell. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped replying to messages. My work suffered. I had to lay off 2 part-time employees just to stay solvent after covering the damage Joel's tampering had caused. A few clients pulled contracts when orders were rerouted. Embarrassing, but salvageable. Still, it hurt. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was tired. Deeply, soul-level tired. And then, one night, I found an old photo album while cleaning out a storage bin. It was dusty, the edges curled from years in a forgotten closet. Inside were pictures from high school, me and my best friend Zach goofing off with a camcorder, my first car, a rust bucket Honda I bought myself, my senior project, an early prototype for the inventory system my company now uses, and a picture of me with a caption Joel had scrawled in red marker, "Nerd for LYFE." I stared at that last one for a long time. Then I started to laugh. Not bitterly, just honestly. Because looking at those photos, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I built myself. Not them. Not their praise. Not their money. Me. And no amount of sabotage, no family guilt, no stolen cash could take that away from me. That night, I stayed up till 3 a.m. rebuilding. I reopened old business plans, cleaned up my client list, reached out to contacts I hadn't spoken to in months, told them the truth. No excuses, no sugarcoating. Someone breached my systems. It's been resolved. Here's what I'm doing to prevent it from ever happening again. To my surprise, most of them understood. Some even applauded the transparency. Within 3 weeks, 2 of those clients came back. I hired a new cybersecurity consultant, upgraded all our infrastructure, took a hit financially, but my team rallied. They believed in me, and that lit a fire I hadn't felt in months. I also started therapy, something I never thought I'd do. But man, it helped. Helped me unpack years of resentment I didn't even know I was carrying. Helped me stop trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. Helped me realize that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, it was necessary. My therapist said something that stuck with me. People who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries an attack. Joel wasn't just entitled. He was enabled. Every time I bailed him out, I taught him that consequences didn't apply. And my parents? They didn't want peace. They wanted comfort. And that meant keeping Joel's world intact, no matter who had to pay for it. So I stopped paying. I blocked Joel, changed my number, moved my business to a new office, cut off every channel they could use to reach me. And it was around then that I got a letter. An actual letter, hand-delivered to my building's front desk. No return address, but I knew that handwriting anywhere. It was from Dad. Short. To the point. A single page that read, "We don't understand your hostility. Family means forgiveness. Joel is going through something, and we hoped you'd rise above. You've changed, Nathan. This isn't who we raised you to be." He was right. It wasn't. The person they raised would have kept showing up, kept writing checks, kept shrinking himself to make room for Joel's failures. But that version of me was gone. The new me? He was rebuilding. Not just a business. A life. A sense of worth that wasn't measured by how many fires I could put out for other people. And with every step forward, something inside me grew stronger. Clearer. I wasn't just going to recover. I was going to win. Not out of spite. Not even for revenge. But because nothing rattles people who expect you to crawl back more than watching you rise without them. And quietly, methodically, I began laying the groundwork for something I knew they'd never see coming. They thought I'd moved on. They had no idea I was just getting started. Rising without them felt better than I ever imagined. 6 months had passed since that Easter brunch. 6 months since my parents pointed a fork at me and expected me to fork over my soul. Since Joel gutted my accounts and still managed to look me in the eye like I was the one who betrayed him. And in those 6 months, I'd gone from scraping together business leads and licking my wounds to building something new, something stronger than before. But I never forgot. Not the look in my mother's eyes when she chose silence over defending me. Not the way my father shoved that letter under my door instead of owning his part in what happened. And definitely not the shameless gall Joel had to weaponize our own blood as leverage, like some entitled prince cut off from the royal bank. They thought I was done with them, that I'd faded away quietly, off licking my pride somewhere in exile. But I wasn't done. I wasn't licking wounds. I was sharpening teeth. And I was about to give them the education they never asked for, but so clearly deserved. In consequence, in exposure, and in just how fragile the house of cards they'd built really was. It started small, just whispers at first. See, something most people don't realize about me is that I'm not just a guy who runs a logistics company. That's what pays the bills, sure. But I'd also spent the last decade making quiet inroads into the business community, advisory groups, angel investments, small networking circles. I'd helped enough people with their shipping, sourcing, and scale that when I spoke, people listened. I'd always played that role modestly before, kept things low-key. But now, I was going to use it. The first thread I pulled was the loan. That $42,000 pit Joel had allegedly dug for himself. Turns out it wasn't just to launch some NFT project. That was the story he fed to Mom and Dad. But with a little digging, and a quiet favor from an old friend of mine in financial services. I learned the real reason. Joel had racked up gambling debts. Not just friendly poker night stuff either. He was in deep with a couple of unlicensed online betting syndicates, and one of them had started threatening collections in a way that made even me wince. But instead of facing it, Joel tried to invest his way out of the hole by launching a fake crypto token. The token's site, a slapdash one-pager filled with buzzwords and stolen code, had been taken down, but not before he scammed several local investors out of nearly $20,000. The reason they hadn't pressed charges yet? Simple. Most of them were embarrassed. These weren't Wall Street types. These were everyday people, family friends, co-workers, neighbors. People who trusted the promising young entrepreneur their pastor had mentioned, or who met Joel at a barbecue and liked his charm. They didn't want a legal mess. They wanted their money back. I made a list. Every person he'd scammed. Every vendor he'd ghosted. Every shady crypto Discord he'd joined under an alias and posted pump and dump schemes in. I tracked the timelines, the usernames, the transfers. My IT guy, same one who traced the spyware, pieced together a profile that could put a financial fraud unit to shame. But I wasn't handing it over. Not yet. See, revenge, the real kind, isn't about screaming in someone's face and storming out the door. It's about timing. An opportunity. Which brings me to my uncle Victor. Victor is my dad's older brother. He's been a quiet fixture in our family my whole life. The kind of guy who never really took sides, who'd show up to birthdays with a quiet smile and a firm handshake, then disappear before the cake was cut. I always thought he was distant. Turns out, he was just watching. After my fallout with the family, Victor reached out. We met at a little lakeside diner. I wasn't sure what to expect, but he skipped the pleasantries and got straight to the point. I know what Joel did, he said over coffee. I blinked. How? I've got ears. And friends. And frankly, your parents stopped listening to reason a long time ago. I warned them about coddling him. They didn't listen. I sat back. So why tell me? He gave me a long look. Because you're the one who kept your head down and worked. You built something. And you got burned. That's not right. And it's time someone helped you do something about it. That was the moment I realized I wasn't alone. Victor, as it turns out, had been quietly building his own network for years. He wasn't flashy, but he owned a decent share of properties and had a few connections in city council and local media. More importantly, he detested financial fraud. I see people like Joel every day, he said, and I see what happens when no one holds them accountable. They just keep climbing higher on the backs of the people they hurt. He pushed a manila envelope across the table. Here's what I've gathered. Use it if you want. Or don't. But I thought you should have it. Inside was a full report on Joel's crypto activities. Even I hadn't found some of the accounts he'd uncovered. Turns out, Joel had registered a secondary LLC in my father's name to move funds more discreetly, a fact I was confident Dad didn't know about. Now I had leverage. All I needed was the right moment to use it. So I waited. And while I waited, I rebuilt. I restructured my company, brought in a new COO to handle operations, and freed myself to focus on strategy and growth. I launched a side project, a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs trying to get started without drowning in debt. I reached out to some of the people Joel had scammed and offered them consulting help for free. Not to fix what Joel broke, but to prove that not all of us were the same last name with the same recklessness. And the more I rose, the more I saw the cracks forming back home. Joel was flailing. With the crypto scheme dead and the loan sharks circling, he tried launching a financial coaching YouTube channel. Lasted 3 weeks before the comment section buried him in screenshots and accusations. He started dating the daughter of one of my father's business partners, probably thinking he could charm his way into legitimacy, but that imploded when she learned about his investors. He was drowning. And my parents? They were spiraling with him. Their retirement savings were drying up. I learned from Victor that they'd taken out a second mortgage on the house to cover one of Joel's business emergencies. My father had quietly started liquidating small assets, a boat, some old collectibles, even his golf membership, trying to plug the leak without ever admitting the ship was sinking. But still, no apology. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. So I made my move. The town hosts an annual business expo every fall, a kind of who's who of local success stories, vendors, tech startups, and investors. It's a big deal, and this year, they'd invited me to give the keynote. Joel showed up too. He wasn't invited, of course, but he somehow slipped in under one of his shell company names and claimed a vendor booth for his financial literacy coaching service. It was laughable. He had a banner printed with stock photos and a slogan he clearly ripped off from a TED Talk. But the moment I saw him, I knew it was time. I walked past his booth, paused just long enough for him to notice, and nodded politely. He didn't say a word, just stared. That evening, during the keynote, I told my story. Not with names, not with dramatics, just facts. I spoke about trust, betrayal, and the cost of enabling mediocrity. I spoke about building something with your own hands and watching others try to steal it, believing they were entitled to what they never earned. I spoke about boundaries and how the most powerful word in business is no. And when I was done, I shared a new initiative, a fraud prevention program I'd been building with Victor's help, one that would support small business owners who'd been taken advantage of by friends, family, or fake partners. We were launching a resource center, a legal aid network, and a scholarship fund for young entrepreneurs who'd been burned trying to chase a dream. The applause was thunderous. Joel. He slipped out before the last round of questions. 2 days later, I released a full expose, anonymously, through a journalist friend Victor connected me with. It detailed Joel's scam, the fake investments, the stolen LLCs, the crypto tokens, every piece of evidence, laid out in black and white. Names were redacted, but if you knew the players, it was obvious. Fallout came fast, and I wasn't done yet. I didn't need to gloat. That's the thing people misunderstand about revenge. It's not about screaming, "I told you so," or standing on the rubble with your arms raised like some kind of twisted hero. The best revenge is when they destroy themselves. You just hand them the mirror. And Joel, he looked in the mirror and shattered. 3 days after the expose dropped, he went into full panic mode. I know this because 2 separate people, one from the local business council, the other from a nearby co-working space he frequented, forwarded me messages he'd sent, begging them to publicly deny the allegations and clear his name. But no one did, because the evidence spoke for itself. Wire transfers, company registrations, screenshot after screenshot of promises made and money never returned. All time-stamped, all verifiable, and all public now. I didn't attach my name to the expose. I didn't need to. But I made sure the right people knew where to look if they were curious. The fallout was immediate. The local Chamber of Commerce revoked his vendor credentials. The coaching service he'd been trying to push was flagged for financial misrepresentation. The bank that held the LLC accounts began an internal investigation and froze the funds. And Joel? He went to my parents. That part, I only know secondhand, from Victor. Apparently, Joel showed up at their house at 2 a.m., banging on the door like a man possessed. He was shouting about betrayal, about how someone was out to get him, how everyone turned against me. According to Victor, who got the story from a neighbor, Joel was sobbing in the front yard by dawn. The next morning, my mother called me. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, shaky voice, somewhere between angry and terrified, asking me if I had anything to do with the article. She didn't say expose. She didn't say investigation. She said article, like it was a tabloid rumor, not a carefully constructed portfolio of her son's crimes. I didn't respond. I got a call from my father that evening. He didn't leave a voicemail. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "You ruined your brother. Hope it was worth it." I blocked it, but I screenshotted it first, just in case. Joel went into hiding after that, deleted his social media, shut down his website, canceled the fake business seminars he'd been planning at the community center. A few of the people he scammed came forward publicly once the article made waves, and that pushed it to the local news. No names were released on air. Again, still technically anonymous. But people started putting the pieces together. Joel's face, already known from his brief YouTube stint, was suddenly everywhere in whispers and group chats. That's when the lawsuit started. First was a small claims suit from a teacher he'd convinced to invest $5,000 into his crypto fund. Then another, a 19-year-old kid who gave Joel his graduation money in exchange for a 200% return by Christmas. And then a third, a single mom who trusted him because they went to the same church. 3 suits turned into 5, then 8, then 12. Victor and I watched it unfold with quiet detachment. He never pushed for anything dramatic. He just kept feeding me quiet updates. He said he'd never seen justice served so neatly. And me? I got back to work. I refocused my energy on the scholarship fund, now named the Boundary Grant, a little inside joke for myself. I hosted workshops, consulted for young startups, made a few smart investments. The media buzz around the expose actually gave my company a small PR boost. A few outlets even called it a rare case of silent entrepreneurship fighting back against fraud. I never claimed credit. I never needed to. But one moment will stay with me forever. It was a month after the expose. I stopped by the grocery store late one night, just grabbing some snacks after a long day, and as I stood in the checkout line, I heard a voice behind me. Nathan. I turned. It was Mr. Cormick, my old high school economics teacher. He looked exactly the same, only grayer, with that same half-smile and kind eyes. I thought that was you, he said. Saw your name on the scholarship site. That's you, right? I nodded. Yeah, that's me. He nodded, too, and lowered his voice. I read the article. The real one. I don't know if it was you who leaked it, but thank you. That guy almost convinced my niece to cash out her Roth IRA. I didn't say anything, just nodded again. But he patted me on the shoulder and added something I'll never forget. It's not easy to stand up to family. Most people don't. Most people let it slide. But you didn't. He paused. You saved more people than you know. And then he walked away. That hit me harder than I expected. Because all those months of therapy, rebuilding, silence, they'd taught me a lot. About strength. About worth. About choosing your peace over their comfort. But hearing someone say it out loud? That was different. Joel didn't go to jail. Not yet, anyway. Most of the lawsuits settled. He paid back what he could, probably using whatever was left of my parents' equity. A few of the investors, out of compassion or exhaustion, dropped the charges altogether. My guess is he'll eventually try to disappear, maybe change his name, pop up in some new state as a consultant or strategist, or whatever snake oil term is trending next. But anyone who Googles him will find the trail. That can't be wiped. As for my parents, they never apologized. Not once. Not for doubting me. Not for enabling Joel. Not for calling me the problem when I was the only one brave enough to say enough. But I don't need their apology. Because now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the fixer. The scapegoat. The walking wallet. I see the man who walked out of Easter brunch with nothing and came back with everything. And Joel? He lost the one thing he never thought he'd need. Someone who believed in him. Family means sacrifice, my father once said. He was right. I just stopped sacrificing myself. And I never gave them another fork to point.